When I say the phrase master of horror, what comes to mind? Maybe it's a prolific horror novelist like Stephen King. Perhaps you think of directors who worked on a lot of horror like John Carpenter or Wes Craven. But what about the medium of comics? Who do you associate with horror? I'm not talking about a title like Tales from the Crypt, but an artist or a writer. There have, of course, been dozens of excellent comics creators who've worked in horror like Bernie Wrightson. But I'd argue it's not always the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Master of Horror. Unless you've already read comics by Junji Ito. Junji Ito broke into manga comics in Japan in the early 90s while working as a dental technician. We'll try not to read too much into the stereotype that dentists like causing pain. Ito's created some multi-volume comics like Tomy about a beautiful mysterious girl who drives men to madness with jealousy and rage, or Uzumaki, which centers itself on a small coastal town whose inhabitants are slowly driven to varying degrees of madness when they are haunted by spirals. That's right, the idea of a spiral. But many of his comics are one-shots, just a single issue exploring a terrifying idea. Ito's illustrations can range from beautiful to grotesque, but your appreciation for his style may vary depending on your tastes. Instead, what anyone who appreciates horror will be able to enjoy about his works is its unpredictability, its dreamlike logic, the grounded settings and relationships used in stories, and his masterful use of pacing to put you, the reader, in control of moving forward in a story that's unsettling. I'll explain more about these elements as we continue, but first, let's explore Ito's tropes relating to subject matter. Junji Ito has written and illustrated many stories, but recurring ideas crop up several times. Body horror is one. Another is formerly rational characters feeling compelled to do horrible things to themselves or others. Ito also likes to investigate threats that have no clear rules, operating with a dreamlike logic and driving people insane with their existence. He also frequently uses creatures from the sea. Finally, he has stories where characters have to deal with the inevitability of death. And of course, many of these ideas will appear together. Let's briefly look at each one more closely to understand his techniques. Junji Ito explores horrible things done to the human body in a majority of his stories. And sometimes the characters are doing these things to themselves. In Flesh-Colored Horror, a mother and her sister master the art of leaving their skin as though it was a suit because they find the human body more beautiful without. It's only after one of their skin suits is ruined that the true horror of how the sisters treat each other is revealed. In Hello Dollies, children come down with a disease that freezes them in a doll-like state. But if the body isn't buried and disposed of, it evolves into an even more disgusting form. In Uzumaki, a quiet coastal town is haunted by the very concept of spirals. One character's father becomes obsessed with collecting objects that have spirals. When his wife throws out his collection in an attempt to get him to return to his job, he reveals he no longer needs his collection because he can make spirals himself. First, he rotates his eyes in opposite directions. Later, his tongue extends to grotesque lengths. Ultimately, his family finds he has managed to turn his whole body into a spiral in a vat, killing himself. And that's just the first chapter of this extensive story. Compulsion drives many of his stories. The idea of doing something against your own best interests is a scary concept, but we've probably all had a moment somewhere where we're scared that we could take a wrong step off a high cliff or jump into busy traffic. But this momentary thought is nothing compared to witnessing characters actually act on these impulses. Tomy is an extended story of people harming themselves and others out of jealousy towards the beautiful Tomy. But my personal favorite story about compulsion is from The Enigma of Amagara Fault. An earthquake reveals a cliff face along a fault line. It seems to have person-shaped holes across it. No one can determine how they were formed or made, but ultimately, one man realizes that one of the holes is perfectly shaped for him and him alone. He enters the hole and never comes back out. Eventually, Other people are compelled to enter the dark holes, even though they know they won't be coming back out. Junji Ito loves exploring unknowable horror. In many ways, some of his monsters or situations are of a dreamlike quality, without firm rules. And being faced with these situations drives characters crazy. Ito has listed H.P. Lovecraft as an influence, and Lovecraft's idea of ancient gods of chaos that cause madness upon trying to comprehend them is a similar idea to Ito's bizarre creations. In Hanging Balloons, massive balloons appear all over town, and they feature the townspeople's faces. Each balloon has a noose hanging from it, and they taunt and chase the person they represent to hang them. And then you can't even fight back, because when one man shoots a balloon, the kid that it represents has his head melt and deflate just like the balloon. In The Groaning Drain, a girl hears something in her bathroom drain and reaches in to clear it. Though she moans for help all night, her family ignores it, only to find that nearly her entire body has been pulled through the tiny hole throughout the evening. Creatures from the sea seem to fascinate Ito. In the double-volume comic Gyo, a bacteria known as the Death Stench animates fish and even gives them mechanical legs, whereupon they invade the world and slowly begin harvesting people to become power sources. In the short story, The Thing That Drifted Ashore, a massive sea creature washes ashore. Its skin is semi-transparent, and eventually, the townspeople realize it's full of hundreds of people who have existed inside of it as parasites. Inevitability of death is the final trope I'll mention. It's unavoidable, and several of Ito's stories really hammer that idea home. In The Long Dream, a character in a hospital knows she is dying, but also experiences dreams every night that feel longer and longer. A month, a year, 10 years, 1,000. Waking up in the hospital, she rapidly changes as her brain accumulates all these experiences and drive her mad. In Shivers, a cursed jade statue causes holes to form in people, but it doesn't kill them. Instead, they feel the cold of the air passing through them and have to live their normal lives in that pain. These ideas all represent ordinary people that live in normal towns. It's a setting we can relate to, and then things become weird and unknowable. A vampire may be a scary monster idea, but at the same time, we know its rules. We know that we need to drive a wooden stake through its heart. What do we do against a balloon with our face and a noose? In addition to terrifying ideas and disturbing visuals, Junji Ito uses his storytelling ability to pace the stories well. On many pages, before a big reveal of some horrible thing, we have a final panel on the previous page that represents characters reacting to what's happening. It makes us as the reader curious what could be so horrible. But it's now up to us to turn the page and find out. Ito has put that control within our hands, and we love being in control of our horror. We see horror movies because we know it's a fiction we're giving into, but that we can close our eyes or turn away from. Reading the comics makes us complicit. We become a voyeur, and it's up to us now to continue with the horror and move the story forward. I believe that ultimately it's this excellent pacing as well as solid twists to the story that make readers enjoy Junji Ito's horror stories, but also feel like we have a measure of control over the horror as well. Surprise, it's me! Alright, so that'll close it out for both this episode on Junji Ito as well as the whole horror month theme that I've put together this month. I love October, I love getting ready for Halloween. I had a bunch more ideas, but you know what? There will be future episodes, so I couldn't do them all. There are ideas for the future. I wanted to say thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon. I got a bunch of new ones this past week. Thank you. I think it might be because I've been live streaming every single day. For this month, I'm doing an activity that's called Inktober. And the goal there is basically to just draw every single day and become maybe a little bit better artist. So I decided to live stream it so that I sort of had some accountability. Like if I told people I was going to do this, then I can't let them down, right? Anyway, it's been a real pleasure throughout this whole month so far, getting to actually interact and talk with so many of you to see where your interests lie and just have that opportunity to interact. It's been a real pleasure. Will I keep doing it after this month? Still to be decided. It will really depend on how much time I can commit to something like that. But part of me really, really wants to, because I'm having a blast trying to get better as an artist and interacting with so many wonderful viewers, getting to talk about comics and all sorts of other things. So I want to say thank you very much. This has been a really great month for the show. It's been busy. It's been very difficult because I've had travel, I've had sickness, and unfortunately, I've been laid off. So I'm looking for my next job. There's a lot going on in my life, but this show is sort of my rock, and all of you make it worthwhile. So I just wanted to take a moment to just speak from the heart and say thank you. All right, I'll see you next week, and until then, keep reading comics.